Hey, everyone. It is Naomi Wolf of Outspoken and Daily Clout, and I'm really honored to be greeting for the at least second time a very distinguished parent and human being, and that's Grace's dad, Scott Schara. Welcome back, Mr. Schara.
Well, it's good to be back, Naomi. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, though. I wish it were not in such tragic circumstances, every time I speak with you. Well, Grace's dad is a fighter for justice for his daughter, who was his late daughter, who was a beautiful, loving, delightful, center of the family young woman with her whole life ahead of her, who happened to have been born with Down syndrome. And Grace's dad, Mr. Schara, told us last time he met with us about how Ascension hospitals had literally medically murdered his daughter. And I just want to tell you, Mr. Schara, since that interview, we've actually interviewed another mom whose child, adult child, also with Down syndrome, met a very similar fate. So I think it's very likely that these kinds of medical murders are taking place all over the country, or certainly did during the bad years of the lockdowns and restrictions on parents. But why don't you start by telling people a little more about who you are, and then the reason we're talking today, which is that there's been a new development in your effort to seek justice for Grace.
So I'm obviously known as Grace's dad. Interestingly, before she died, I was also known as Grace's dad. Grace was pretty popular in our area because of just how she was. She was a gift from God. And Down syndrome is, for those people who don't understand it, they think it's something to avoid. You wouldn't want that. If we were to ever to have another child, which, of course, I'm way past that age, I would want a child with Down syndrome. As I got to know my best buddy, Grace, I realized I wish I had Down syndrome. And the reason why is because she trusted. She walked the walk. She loved the way God wanted us to love. So what's happened since Grace's death, the 4-year anniversary of her death was October 13th. And about 2 months after she died, I started to research the records. Actually, 3 weeks after she died, I did, but 2 months after, I started speaking out about the records, but not realizing that this is a masterful eugenics program. And I have become a full-time researcher advocate. I'll be publishing my first book coming up in January. The title is the Government Legally Killing Us? And I have come to the conclusion that, in fact, yes, there is a eugenics program that is alive and well. Down syndrome people, the elderly, of course, they're the low-hanging fruit in that program, but the enemy is us. And it's time that we come to grips with that. And that's what my mission is now as a full-time advocate, to help wake people up.
Thank you for that, Mr. Schara. So before I ask you more details about what's happening with your lawsuit, I know this is so painful and awful, but for people who missed our earlier episode about, I think, probably a year and a half ago, could you please just briefly recap what happened to Grace?
Sure. Great question. So on October 6th of 2021, Grace's oxygen saturation had dropped to 88%.
So can you just go back to why was she even in the hospital?
Yeah, so that's why. So what was happening is we were following the FLCCC protocol, measuring her oxygen saturation. It dropped to 88%. The protocol
she
said
had COVID is the start of the story. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, she had something.
Right.
Let's put it that way. Whatever COVID was, she certainly had those symptoms. I mean, respiratory distress, but I mean, she wasn't in respiratory distress. It was simply the low oxygen saturation that motivated us to take her to the hospital. They suggested checking Grace in for 3-4 days as a precautionary measure, putting her on oxygen and a steroid. And that's when things started to go downhill. She was overdosed on.
I'm so sorry to keep interrupting you. I don't want to, but
it's okay.
I will ask follow-up questions when I need to. I'll just raise my hand so I'm not really interrupting. Where was this and what hospital, please?
This was at an Ascension hospital. Ascension is the largest Catholic hospital system in America with 150 hospitals. This was at Ascension St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Thank you so much. All right. So there's Grace, and she's what, 21 years old at this point? I don't remember her.
She was 19.
19.
She had just turned 19 3 weeks before.
Right. And her loving family took, listened to what the doctors were saying, took her to the hospital. They said, leave her here with us, check her in, and we'll give her a steroid and make sure her oxygen levels don't drop too far. Is that the bottom line?
That was the premise that we took, or we submitted to the hospital system under that premise. And if they would have just done that, Grace would be alive today.
Right. So what happened instead of that?
She was given Precedex the first day because they were changing the oxygen protocol from a regular cannula to a high flow cannula and ultimately to a BiPAP. And so they gave her Precedex, and she had her first overdose on Precedex on October 7th.
What kind of drug is Precedex? Why would they give her Precedex? Do you know?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Precedex is a sedation med. It is, they claim it's commonly used in a hospital setting. And so then they, as we have found out by reviewing her records and the jury trial, I mean, they really don't pay attention to the side effects. And Grace had 12 of the side effects that are on the Precedex package insert. And they kept using it. And in fact, on her last day, they combined Precedex with lorazepam and morphine. And that combination is what euthanized Grace. Our expert in the trial, Naomi, who was Dr. Gilbert Burdine, this is the first trial he's ever worked with a plaintiff. He's always worked with the defense, always worked with the medical industry. But when he saw Grace's records, he said, this is so egregious, I'm going to work for the plaintiff. In fact, he didn't take any money personally to be our expert. And he said that combination, when they gave Grace morphine, her blood pressure, according to their own records, was undetectable. And he called it the single worst clinical decision that he's ever seen in 46 years of medical practice.
The last time you shared this story with me and you described the cocktail of drugs that they gave her toward the end of her life, I'm not a medical doctor, but it's clear to me that that's something you would give people that you want to euthanize. Like, there's no way to come back from that. It's sedatives. It slows your heart rate, right? Well, she's already got a slow heart rate. Lorazepam, I mean, these are like big, slow down the system drugs. So I'm not surprised that your expert said, he wants to help you pro bono, because anyone with a high school education knows that that's what you do to put people out, essentially, right? Aren't some of those drugs used before people are executed?
Not that particular combination, but a similar combination. So you've got a sedative with the benzodiazepine and then morphine. That combination is used in a similar category of drug for lethal injections. It's commonly used when people are in their last couple hours of life in hospice care. And on top of that, what happened is the doctor had put an illegal do not resuscitate order on Grace's chart. So when at this point in the hospital stays, now this was October 13th of 21, I had already been taken out by an armed guard. Our daughter Jessica was in the room with Grace, and she started seeing things going awry. So she called Cindy, my wife, and I on a FaceTime call, panicking, and we started screaming to save our daughter. And that's when we learned she was DNR, because the nursing staff refused to come in the room, instead stood outside the room and hollered back, she's DNR. And we screamed, she's not DNR, save our daughter, but they refused. And we watched her die on that FaceTime call.
Oh my God.
So, praise God, we had the opportunity to do a lawsuit to shed light on what's going on behind the curtain. The lawsuit ended on June 19th of this year. It was the first, probably the only lawsuit that will ever be heard in the country to go to jury trial with COVID on the death certificate. And I say that because of the fact that we paid our own way for that lawsuit. So we weren't submitting to the idea of an offer to settle and all the things people do because their attorney leads them that way. You know, I was clear from the start with the legal team, we're not settling no matter what. We need to get this exposed to the public. And, you know, we did. You know, the live stream of the trial was seen by over 1 million people.
Wow.
You know, people got to see what was going on for the first time. And, you know, lots of lives were saved because of that trial. Even though we lost. I mean, the loss is, you know, it's predictable when we're up against the beast system.
Right.
You know, so a loss in that system isn't anything that people should be sad about. They should expect it. You know, you don't, you know, if you just think about just a jury, what is the programming of the jury?
Right.
You know, you and I are awake, but the programming of the jury is that they trust the medical industrial complex. So, you know, the legal team warned me of this, that, you know, to get a jury to agree with us, you know, they're going to have to become, you know, awakened during the trial.
Right.
And the consequence, I mean, you know, already the consequence of being awake is your whole life changes.
Right.
Because now, instead of believing the government is for us, you realize the government is against us.
Right.
Well, that changes your entire worldview.
Totally. Well, I'm also thinking about there's so much that's so terrifying and dark about the scenario that you are reporting and that you endured, that your family endured, that Grace endured above all. I think what you really need to be commended for, of the many things that people watching should be admiring, is that you're trying to uncover the systemic nature of what destroyed your daughter's life. That it's not, you didn't just stop with your daughter. You're suspecting clearly, correctly, that this, you know, this set of protocols, and it's not just one, right? As I recall the story that you told about how they essentially medically kidnapped Grace, sedated her so she couldn't say, no, I don't want that, right? She's an adult, so you can't intervene because she's over 18, right? You don't have the legal right to say no, or do you?
Well, technically, we did have the legal right, and they ignored that also. You know, when Grace turned 18, you know, when you have a special needs daughter in your life, you have a decision to make. Do you do nothing? Do you obtain guardianship, or do you do something else? And we chose to do the third route, something else. In Wisconsin, they have a statute that allows for Grace to be, it's called supported decision making. So we entered into a supported decision making arrangement with Grace, which included medical power of attorney. So we had medical power of attorney.
So you had the power of attorney. Oh my God, this is even more egregious than I thought, as egregious as it is. And then they physically removed you, an armed guard removed you from your daughter's room, so you couldn't protect her, you couldn't advocate for her. And then they illegally put do not resuscitate on her chart, you know, plus this cocktail of drugs. And were they feeding her during these 4 days that she was there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, you're you're doing a great job. I'm a man, so I only can do one thing at a time, Naomi. So you brought up so many things. I got to comment on them now. Were they feeding her? So that is actually one of the reasons that I was taken out. So I was not physically removed. It was an armed guard that escorted me out, but you know, it wasn't that he had. You know, I wasn't in handcuffs. I just want to make the record correct.
Okay. It's
anyway,
bad enough, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, they threatened to call the Appleton Police Department if I didn't leave immediately. So I mean, I was between a rock and a hard place, and I called an attorney friend of mine, and he suggested leaving, so I did leave. But anyway, the incident that got it to that point was I was challenging them to feed Grace, and I told them we can feed Grace. I know how to feed her because, you know, Grace of course could feed herself, but now with a BiPAP. Well, they would come in, the staff would come in and clean her mouth, swab her mouth for moisture and everything, and you know, a couple times a day. And they would remove the BiPAP, put her on a low flow cannula for a while, and it worked fine. I said, that's all we need to do to feed Grace. And you know, the nurse got into an argument with me, said the doctor will never approve that. And I told her bluntly, I said, I am in charge of my daughter's care, not the doctor. Right. And you know, ultimately that led to me being escorted out. you mentioned something else that I want to comment on because it's maybe the most important thing. I don't want to be taking credit for this. I mean, God led me into this, and my background is interesting in that my background is as a CPA. I'm normally used to audit trails. I started researching, started digging. What I found is the single most important thing that people need to be awake of with the medical system in our country, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services controls healthcare through reimbursement rates.
Mhm.
And they do that illegally. They're
Wow.
violating what's called the state actor doctrine. So
Mhm.
these hospitals, the doctors, et cetera, their reimbursement rates are based on the entire patient population following what they call standards of care.
Wow.
And it's not just if you're on Medicare or Medicaid. So they will reduce your reimbursement rates if you don't push the patients to follow standards of care. My wife is with a lady in the hospital right now, and they keep doing this. They want her to go on the statin. It's just a constant barrage of pushing these meds without disclosure of the reimbursement policies, without disclosure of how much they're getting paid for this. On top of that, what they're doing is these doctors, if they have a 16-minute conversation with a patient about end of life, so to get a DNR on their chart, they get paid $94 from Medicare just to have that discussion. This is completely demonic what is going on.
Oh my Lord. That is completely demonic. And if your daughter was having respiratory distress, what possible medical reason could they have given for not feeding her? I mean, your body needs energy to fight an infection. Did they tell you why they weren't feeding her? I should disclose, and maybe I shared this when we last spoke, this partly comes from my having almost died in the hospital. Thank God I didn't, but it was a very systematic, it had some very real parallels with what your poor daughter went through, which is they wouldn't feed me. They wouldn't let Brian in. They wouldn't let me intervene. They kept delaying and delaying my life-saving um, procedure because of the power went out. Allegedly they delayed it for 3 days. They weren't giving me water, and then they were saying, oh, don't worry, we'll put her on a respirator, and they were giving me drugs that were depressing my heart rate and so on. So I think that I know that this is systemic, but I guess what I want to also ask is, I want to ask, what medical reason were they giving for not feeding her? But the other thing I wanted to say is, and I'm just like sharing, right? Because I know that you're onto something massive and demonic and systemic. Uh, they, there is no up the chain of command. I couldn't find the source of I mean, it could be an algorithm, oh, here's a healthy young woman with Down syndrome. Here's a dissident, right? Here's someone who questions the medical system. You don't know what the algorithm is saying, but what I experienced in the hospital was that the nurses weren't accountable to, like, they were getting direction on their little algorithm device. The doctor didn't come see me, but the doctor wasn't accountable. And if you've got an algorithm doing all of this, which AI can now do, they can kill you without anyone being guilty of the murder, right? Just through the protocols or just through the algorithm, honestly, pushing some kinds of care further and further away so the human body can't support it. That I just wanted to share that. So what did they say to you about why you couldn't feed your daughter?
Well, they use the excuse is that she's on the BiPAP. So what happened, interestingly, Grace's last day on Earth, we had a call with the doctor that morning. He said, Grace had another good day yesterday. We should work on nutrition. This is her last day. While we were on the call, the nurse increased the Precedex to the maximum allowable dose. So he says Grace is such a good day, we should work on nutrition. So then he went through a discussion of a feeding tube. So my wife and I approved a feeding tube based on that discussion. He
Wait,
said
you're
we
saying
need to
she
get.
was there for 4 days with no feeding tube?
Well, I was feeding her from the 7th, 8th, and 9th when I was in the room with her. So I was physically feeding her. I was ordering food from the cafeteria and helping her eat.
But the hospital was not giving her any nutrition for those
Correct.
days?
The hospital was not. Correct. Yeah. I didn't even see that as nefarious as you do, but the reason I see it as nefarious now is because of how it got laid into her last day. So we approved that feeding tube
Sure.
based on the prognosis. The doctor said, we need to get Grace's bowels moving, get her out of bed today, so she can be home in the next several days. So we approved the feeding tube based on that prognosis. Well, when the nurse inserted the feeding tube, consistent with doing that at about 11:30, 5 minutes before she put her on the first dose of lorazepam, with the excuse was, Grace is already sedated at the maximum allowable dose of Precedex. Oh, we got to add lorazepam so that she doesn't have a reaction to this feeding tube going down her nose. It is when you
Oh
put
my
the pieces
gosh.
together, it's hard for me to stomach my best buddy sitting there and how they did this to her. But, praise God, we have this platform to be able to get this message out to other people. The systemic piece where you're talking about AI, what's interesting now, I don't like to focus on COVID because then it's like we turn the page or turn the
Right, right,
chapter, because this is way bigger than COVID.
right.
With the COVID protocols, they had the PrEP Act as their immunity from liability, but they have this standards of care, which a lot of them, as you mentioned, are AI. That's their real immunity from liability, and that's been happening since the early 80s.
Mm.
So this has been a long process that they have immunity from liability for following standards of
So
care.
all they
That
have to say to you, or all the opposition's lawyer, Ascension Hospital's lawyer has to say to you is, we followed standards of care for treating your daughter. Sorry,
That's
right?
exactly what they did at the trial. So we had, our doctor expert, they brought in 5 doctor experts. Our expert said bluntly, these meds killed Grace. They didn't follow the standard of care, but there are 5 Johns Hopkins doctors, and 2 of them were from Johns Hopkins, and other prominent educated people, they said that they followed the standard of care. And it's not, not that they're glad Grace was dead, but it just is, they did everything they're supposed to do.
And
They,
that's going to be such a winning argument with a jury,
yeah,
unfortunately,
and it
because
was,
doctor
the
was right.
only 1 out of the 12 jury members sided with us.
Oh my gosh, how horrific. So what is the status of your lawsuit now? Are you appealing? What's the news? I see that there's a lot of news coverage of your
Yeah,
litigation.
I'm surprised at how fast the news picked up on it, because I did my formal announcement of it yesterday, but last week, Wednesday, I filed a motion for new trial, and that's not an appeal. So a motion for new trial goes back to the court that made the mistake. And so what the basis of this motion for new trial is the judge, this was happening behind the scenes. Nobody knew this because it wasn't in the trial. The trial was June 2nd through the 19th. The pretrial hearing was May 19th and 20th. So what I'm going to explain next happened on May 20th. And I was there, there was nobody else in the courtroom other than attorneys and me. And what happens in the pretrial is you go through a whole bunch of different things to lay out how the trial is going to be run. And one of the things that happens is you file motions in limine. So these are very specific things that are filed so that they can't be brought into the trial. So, for example, the defense motion in limine said, we don't want to use the word murder at the trial. So the judge ruled on that. Okay, we're not using the word murder. So that's an example of a motion in limine.
Wow.
Okay, so the defense, from my memory, had 23 motions in limine. We went through all of those methodically. The judge heard argument on each one, made some tentative rulings. Well, then we started talking about, we switched gears right before a break, and he wanted to talk about the live stream of the trial. And the New American magazine had already requested the court that they'd be willing to provide the camera crew, et cetera. And so the defense objected to that because they said, well, the New American is in the plaintiff's back pocket. And, so we had a break, we came back, and we wanted to explain to the judge that it isn't just the conservative media, but the liberal media also wants to cover it.
Right.
And they explained that I had just had an interview with the Milwaukee Journal and the Appleton Post-Crescent, and the judge got angry with that. And we didn't know, at the time, I thought the reason he got angry with it was because I gave the interview so close to the trial, and my attorneys don't have control of their client. I'm outspoken.
Right.
I've been on 1,200 interviews, Naomi.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm very outspoken. I'm going to do interviews until the day I die.
Right.
Anyway, he got very angry with that. And so now it came to our motions in limine. And
Right.
after he got angry, he said, there's going to be consequences. All the consequences are going to be to the plaintiff. This is all in the motion. We
Oh
took
my gosh.
we took the transcript and then, took the pieces out of the transcript for the motion. He said, Attorney Mendenhall may get a letter from me tomorrow that's saying he's off the case. And then right after that, when we got to go, it was time to go through our motions in limine, which we had 7 of them from memory. And he said, all plaintiffs' motions in limine are denied. So the essence, so he didn't even hear anything on ours. He completely denied them. And our motions in limine were based on, we wanted the case to be about Grace's death instead of my religious beliefs and the things that I've learned about the systemic nature of the medical industry post Grace's death, because that has nothing to do with Grace's death.
I'm sorry, why are your religious beliefs at issue in this trial? I mean, why?
We should not have been. That's why we put it. That's why we had it in our motions in limine. But because he denied our motions in limine, the defense was able to bring that stuff in and make me into a conspiracy nut to the jury. So the trial became a lot about me.
About you. How awful.
So that's what happened at the trial. So that's why I filed the motion for new trial.
Oh my gosh, that's so unethical, and it's got to be illegal. Like, what does it matter what, a bereaved parent's views are in the rest of the world? And your religious beliefs shouldn't even be brought up. I mean, how is that even constitutional? I'm shocked. And were you actually enjoined not to speak to the media, or did the judge just get mad after the fact? I mean, did your lawyer tell you not to speak to the media? Because that can be a real thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the condition of me hiring the legal team was that I'm going to speak to the media. So they all knew what they were getting into with me. And what we did, we're thinking that the judge would back off of this denial. So Attorney Mendenhall wrote an apology letter to the judge that evening, and then instructed me I had about 30 interviews scheduled pre-trial, and I canceled all 30 interviews, thinking the judge would then see, okay, we want to play the game right in your court, but he let the defense do their attack on me and my wife and my daughter.
What was wrong? What did the defense say was wrong with your religious beliefs?
They didn't say anything was wrong with them. But the idea, if you think about a jury, okay, so I'll just give you a simple example. So they asked my opinion about COVID. Okay, so that was not, that was in our motions in limine. And so now I'm under oath. I've got to tell the truth. I said, yeah, I believe that COVID was not a virus. It's never been proved that it was a virus. I think it was a poison released by our government. So, I mean, I had to tell the truth under oath. I mean, that should have never come into the trial, because think about the jury.
Right.
The jury is all into the propaganda, right?
So the defense's, it sounds like the defense's tactic was to undermine your credibility and have a focus be on this crackpot rather than this beautiful deceased young woman.
Well, that's exactly, they just did their job. I mean, once the judge gave them the green light, of course, if you're the defense, that's what you're going to do.
So that's how they brought up your views on COVID, but how did the defense bring up your views on religion? I'm just very interested, because I do think this is demonic, like the fact that a whole healing system, especially that's Catholic, can be devoted to death and darkness. And I'm very interested in hearing how their defense used your religion. Do you remember how they brought that up at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't remember how they specifically did that anymore.
Did they ask you, how often do you go to church, or, do you think there's an afterlife? Was it questions like that?
No, they didn't ask those questions. They asked me though if they asked me somehow it got brought up my views that I think Satan is behind this agenda. So
Oh,
that got into the trial. Um,
wow. So they brought up, they led you to talk about Satan to make you
correct.
seem crazy. It's that Mark Twain quote, or maybe it's Charles Baudelaire, Satan's best trick is to persuade people that he doesn't exist.
Yeah,
That is extraordinary. So you had to say, being a religious person and person of integrity, yes, I believe Satan's behind this agenda, or words to
correct.
that effect. What do you remember what you actually said?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, I wish I had a memory of that right now, but I don't remember exactly. I mean, I answered every question truthfully. I mean,
Right.
it
They
is.
must have
Yeah.
the opposition. I mean, they've got more money than God, as the expression goes. And your opposition must have gone through many, many, many hours of your interviews to know what your beliefs were in that kind of
Well,
detail.
actually, the reason they knew my beliefs, I'm sure they're studying my interviews, but more importantly, we had depositions. My deposition was like I think it was 17 hours long over 3 days,
Oh my gosh.
and so we really got into the weeds with their questions in
Right.
deposition because in
Right.
deposition there's no restrictions at all. So
Right.
we're believing, okay, well, this is just deposition. We'll be able to keep this stuff out at trial.
Right,
Um,
but clearly the defense attorneys knew to ask you in your deposition about your religious beliefs.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, I just think it's such a, again, demonically clever way for them to put you in a cul-de-sac and use your actual beliefs, which I think spiritually are very, very reasonable beliefs, but they take some explaining to a general audience, right? That you're
Exactly,
have to
exactly. You're
do.
not going to, for example, we wanted to, um, which I think we were somewhat successful at keeping the vaccination agenda out because, Grace was never vaccinated, so that would, right away you got 11 out of 12 jurors, I'm sure, are vaccinated and believe in vaccination. So
Right,
all of a sudden, I don't believe that came up. We were actually going to use that at the beginning because
right,
they documented in the medical records the bias towards Grace because she was not vaccinated.
right,
So we thought we were going to use that at the beginning, but then
right.
realized we don't want to use that because most of the jury is going to believe in vaccinations.
Absolutely. However, in my very cynical, having nearly been killed by these people, conjecture, I remember that in 2021 and 2022, when did your daughter pass away? What year?
21.
21. The news media was really issuing a drumbeat. And by the way, I just want to put this together with in April and May of 2021, the Biden administration was informed, our work uncovered this, that young adults were being harmed. They were being given heart disease essentially by the mRNA injection. And instead of coming clean with the American people, there was a cover up at the highest
Correct.
levels, including probably the White House. So that whole, as a, late spring, summer, and into the fall, there was a drumbeat of news coverage about how young adults and children and teens needed this injection. And I
Exactly.
remember that they were taking cases of kids and teens and young adults who were really sick with other things or died from other things, when you teased apart the news stories. But there was a high premium on coming up with stories of healthy young adults, teenagers who died, who were unvaccinated, who died with COVID. And I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist, but your daughter's death, which was so orchestrated, your daughter's murder, I'm going to say, you don't have to say it, or you can. I know that another parent, I know that let me put this very carefully. I know that the legal teams of the hospitals are trying to threaten people who say phrases like medical murder. They can come after me. I will say medical murder. They can send me a lawyer's letter. This is clearly a medical murder. I think that if they had been successful with their PR, if you hadn't raised such a fuss about it immediately as you should have, that could have been grist for a publicity mill of, see, here was this healthy young woman. She was unvaccinated. She got COVID and died. I don't mean to go too far afield,
No,
but
you're right. I mean, this whole thing in 21 was quite interesting because the Brooke Jackson case was already filed on June 8th. So the government knew on June 8th that they were exposed. Um, yes, so it was. So then what did they do? I mean, they doubled down on propaganda. They incentivized physicians. I mean, you've seen, I'm sure, the same documents I have, where these physicians, if they could get 75% of their patients jabbed in that last quarter of 21, they would get between a $250,000 and $300,000 bonus.
unbelievable.
That's in then zoom out. When now that we have statistics on COVID, we know that in America 1.2 million Americans lost their lives in hospitals with COVID as a diagnosis during that 39-month, I'm just going to call it the COVID era. So where does that fit worldwide? Well, we only have 4.2% of the population, yet we were number one in COVID hospital deaths, followed by number two, which with 534,000 deaths, which is India, with a population 4 times that of the United States. So now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to connect those dots to realize these people died as a fear porn to get people to take the jab.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question. Which is again why this other parent's story, which mirrors yours so closely, and the fact, I think I disclosed this to you in our last conversation, that we've sent lawyers' letters to Ascension ourselves long before we even met you or knew about you, because they were giving people remdesivir, which was killing them. They were giving elderly people remdesivir, otherwise known as run death is near. So they had
Right.
they've had this murder agenda, in multiple places, multiple locations. The Ascension Network we wrote to is actually in Florida. So all over the country, this hospital network and maybe others had a systematic set of protocols to kill people off. The hospital that I almost died in was not an Ascension hospital. It was a Nuvance hospital, but with the incentives that you're describing, which are true. We know that's true. And we know that hospitals got $40,000 for every death with COVID that they could rack up. You are looking at a murder machine. Let me ask you one other question. I know this is a painful question, and I may have asked it last time. Were you put under any pressure? Did the question of donating Grace's organs come up at all in this horrible experience?
That's a great question. No, that did not come up. And I have a retired doctor that's going to be on my podcast on Thursday to talk about organ donation and how, that's another hidden agenda. You think about the propaganda for years, it's you can save other people's lives or donating your organs. The license, when you go in to get your license, they have that as, what is going on? I mean, this is all this propaganda. When you start seeing it in a much bigger picture, you realize they've been working on this for well over 100 years.
Oh, indeed. And picking up, the populations that are initially targeted from the Nazi doctors in the early 1930s. I will say it, it is true. Anyone can read Racial Hygiene, which is a history of the medical profession in the early 1930s. Doctors and medical organizations were the advance guard for Nazi ideology, and they targeted the first kind of culling of the life unworthy of life population. We may have talked about this before, were in pre-Nazi Germany, were people like your daughter, young adults with mental challenges or impairments. And they were taken by the state, for treatment. And then, oh gosh, the families got letters or telegrams saying, sorry, your child passed away,
Exactly.
in medical treatment, in the course of being medically treated.
Well, here's an interesting one that happened during the trial, and the judge, the defense objected, and the judge sustained the objection. So I wasn't able to explain this to the jury at the trial, but since COVID, there's been umpteen studies, and one study was right on point with DNRs with people with Down syndrome. So this was printed in the American Journal of Genetics in December of 2023, and the study was 1.7 million patients across 825 hospitals. So this was a broad study right during the COVID time, and they found that if a person had Down syndrome, they had a 630% more likely chance of having a DNR put on their hospital record.
But how can a hospital put a DNR on someone's record
Yeah,
unless
I know that's a common question, and my answer, I'm smiling because the answer is so simple when you think about it. With everything you see, that it's completely demonic, and the answer is because they can.
Right. And with digital records, they can do it without you even
knowing.
doing it. And how often, I just really want to warn people about this. This sounds very nerdy, but it's very important. How often when I'm getting medical stuff done these days, I am very aware and very upset because we have HIPAA law, which protects our records. No one's supposed to be able to tamper with our records. Our records legally belong to us, our medical records, not to the hospital. But or the doctor, I'm very aware that A, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get your records in your own custody. But B, when you sign in, you're handed, at least in New York State these days, a digital thing to sign with nothing attached to it. And it says, I've read all the above and I agree. And I'm like, I haven't read all what above? What? Exactly. What am I agreeing to? And then, I've been given, all these disclosures. No, I haven't. And then when you pester these poor people at the front desk enough, eventually sometimes they show you what you're signing on to. And it's literally the privatizing of your entire medical record to third parties usually, but it could also link to other links that are like, oh yes, and please, use my organs. For instance, they fold in language like, I consent to research. Well, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Exactly. Like some other document could say research is you get my kidney. No, I didn't say you got my kidney. Well, look, Naomi, you signed this right here. So it's very, very nefarious. You guys try to get everything you're signing in a paper written form, and you have the right to strike out sections that you don't even understand. You have the right to do that.
And I'm gonna just take that one step further, Naomi, because at the trial, the judge was tipping his hat towards and this concept it is another demonic concept, implied consent. So he was saying that by being in a hospital, you're giving implied consent. So then the last day of the trial, I got back on the stand because we wanted to show, we had some things in our back pocket that came out at the trial, and this was one of them. We knew they had a fraudulent document. The general consent document was fraudulent in the medical records. And so we presented that at the trial. And specifically, how do I know it was fraudulent? Is because Grace and I got to the emergency room about 2:10 in the afternoon on October 6th. At 2:17, they said somebody had a conversation with Grace, not me. I was with Grace the whole time. Somebody had a conversation with Grace, and she orally approved the general consent document. And there's a spot on the general consent document that if you are the person who has that conversation with the person who's orally approving it, you're supposed to put your name on it. Of course, there's no name, there is nothing, and even presenting that fraudulent document, you'd think the jury would think, oh my gosh, these people are shysters.
But this is huge what you just said.
It's huge. I mean, that's what the jury decided. They decided that in a hospital setting, you're giving implied consent.
But that is such a gigantic legal precedent, unless it's already been set as a precedent. Everyone needs to know that if that's the case. I mean, that means that a nurse can come up to you while you're in pain or while you're with your minor child who's in pain and say, hey, do you want to get help? And you can say yes. And then she or he can write down that's implied consent.
Exactly.
That's terrifying. Or just walking in an ER, walking in to a hospital, you are implying your consent to anything they want to do to you. This is absolutely terrifying. This turns hospitals into killing fields with impunity. It is basically the PrEP Act for hospitals and for
That's
medical care, although in an incredibly evil, nefarious way. Demonic is the word. Do you want to say anything to that, or can we move on to my last set of questions?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. That huge story. I mean, gigantic. So you're filing for a whole new trial, and it's very interesting. I'll post this again. Bob Brewer, really great comment, said, read Blackstone. Blackstone is the British legal commentator, right, on whose work our system is based, to see how this judge and trial are utterly unconstitutional. And it sounds like they are utterly unconstitutional in so many ways, or it is. So you're filing for a new trial, and is Mr. Mendenhall, who is also a hero, your counsel for that one too? And are you hoping for another judge, different jury?
Yeah, great question. Great questions. So in the process of preparing the motion for new trial, there's the idea, how do you do this? So there's a rule that says if you're going to file a motion, it has to be within 20 days unless there's newly discovered evidence. So the newly discovered evidence is how this got filed. And so the newly discovered evidence is this judge was under investigation for another situation while our trial was going on. And that investigation closed after our trial, and he's resigning on February 1st as a result.
What did he do? What was the other investigation for?
Well, I mean, he gave consequences that were outside of his authority. And so ultimately that, he didn't get charged with that, and he's resigning February 1st. So this came to light afterward. And so he also, against the court rules, the defense filed a motion for costs. So if you lose a civil trial, they get costs by statute, but they've got to file a motion. So they filed a motion roughly for $55,000 of costs. The judge signed that without any opportunity for us to rebut it. So that violated two different things. First, it's by rule, the clerk is the one who has to sign it, and we're supposed to have 3 days to rebut. Right. And so he did that. So both of those things come to light, and you're thinking, okay, well, he has a beef against this newspaper. He has a beef against me because why did he do that? So that becomes the newly discovered evidence. Right. Well, the legal team said, well, Scott, here's the problem, is that we had an obligation to know this about the judge ahead of time, which, I disagree with. I think, how could you know he's going to have this bias ahead of time? And then that gets, because we should have known, that gets imputed to you, Scott. And so I had to file this filing pro se because of that. They had to get out of the case before I could file the motion.
I see.
Because
I don't know what pro se means.
Pro se means without an attorney.
I see. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you're carrying on the fight, and there have been some irregularities in how the last trial was, proceeded and wrapped up, and you're exploiting them. I was just smiling when you were talking, not because it's funny, but because your training say it again, you're an actuary, or what's your training?
No, as a certified public accountant.
You're training as a CPA. They tangled with the wrong dad here. They killed the wrong guy's daughter. I mean, I think, or they're trying to suppress the wrong guy, I should say.
I got to just share this because it's so funny. Yeah. And the defense filed their brief in opposition to my filing yesterday. And one of the things they wrote in there is that I'm practicing law without a license. So this should get dismissed. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm actually stating the law without a license.
Right. Well, this is exactly what we need to break down, is this kind of everything you're doing is perfectly legal, and it's what citizens need to do. You're learning about medical procedure. You're learning about the law. You're, poring over your daughter's records. You're poring over the paper trail. You're leaving no stone unturned. And our corrupt institutions want to say you're not allowed to do that. Well, you're entirely allowed. do that. So they have a fight on their hands with you, Mr. Schara, and it's very, very good. So in our last, I mean, it's what I should say, it's not good. None of this is good, but it's what Grace deserves. It's the minimum that Grace deserves. So Freedom Sleuth says, I watched Grace's trial here on X every day. It was broadcast and felt disgusted after each day closed. My family and I are praying for your updated filing to be ruled in your lovely daughter's memory. Much love from Canada. And I think there are many prayers among our audience for justice to honor your lovely daughter's memory. So let me ask you this in our last few minutes. You know, you're a person of faith. And I interviewed you first when all of, you know, when you were still, when things were even closer to this trauma
Right.
for your family and this great loss, this loss that can never be healed, really. So nothing has stopped you. You've given, as you say, 1,200 interviews. You're, you know, not curling up and saying, okay, we lost after this legal setback, this judicial setback. I just want to note that the judiciary in Wisconsin isn't not, you know, networked with the government, which isn't not networked with the hospital system, right? They're all the same echelon of people who are all embedded in each other's kind of influence and spousal jobs and so on, typically. But leaving that aside, you're not giving up. And you feel like you've got a mission and you're saving a lot of lives. Let's go big picture. And you have expressed, and I believe you, that you're fighting, you know, that this is a demonic system. It's a satanic system that is killing elderly people, young, healthy people with disabilities. You know, we know the gigantic crime. So big picture spiritually, what the heck is going on? And what do you think your role is in it, in a fight between good and evil spiritually?
Boy, that's my favorite question. So hang on. So what I think is going on is God showed us through Revelation 13 Satan's dual nature, which the dual nature is an antichrist physical side and a false prophet spiritual side. So both are in play. We've got the antichrist beast systems and the false prophet beast systems that Satan is in charge of both sides. So it isn't, when you look at this from a simplistic perspective, you can see it very easily. So you got evil Republicans and the less evil, or excuse me, the evil Democrats and the less evil Republicans. Well, Satan's in charge of both. So politics is not our way out of this, folks.
Right.
You know, they play that game. It's always evil, less evil, less evil. And that plays off of Revelation 13. Antichrist, false prophet. Satan's got both sides. God's way is always outside of that satanic paradigm. And so what I always tell people, the only way out of this is repentance. We have all participated in the system. We've all been duped, and they've done it systemically over time. So we have a fiat currency, for example. So why do we have a fiat currency? Well, it's because they need to be able to have money be a deception. So they use money as the reason why we need to ration care. We've got 135 million Americans on Medicare and Medicaid. We've got to do something. We've got to ration care. And, you know, that's a complete lie because we have a fiat currency. They're using the money as the tool to reduce the population and cull the population. We've bought into the government taking care of us with our retirement through Social Security. We bought into the government taking care of us through our medical needs when we retire through Medicare. So we've bought into this statist hell, all of us. Most of us tacitly, some of us directly. And that's why it got completely away from God's design. And that's why I believe 100% repentance is the only way out of this.
Wow. Well said. I'm getting chills. Stephanie Forer Harbridge says, I watched every day too, your daughter's trial, or the trial for your justice for your daughter. I live in Wisconsin. I retired from an ambulance and hospital work before COVID. I'm thoroughly disgusted by what happened in the trial and what happened to Grace and your family. If I were in the hospital that day, I would have fought for her life. I know I would have. May God's justice reign upon all the evildoers, in this case, tenfold. I'm sorry, you always make me cry, Mr. Schara, when I talk to you. Is it crazy to think that do people say that when they talk to you, they can feel do they say that when they talk to you, they can feel Grace's presence?
Some I get a lot of comments that people really have, yeah, they have no idea what it was like to have Grace in our life, but I mean, they get this sense that they know Grace through me. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's,
right.
she, she taught me a lot. And, I'm not close to the level she was at.
Right.
But I'm growing every day.
Well, let me end on a much more hopeful and positive note in honor of your daughter's memory. And Stephanie says 100%. You said at the start of this interview that you would want, I mean, you said a lot of people would be shocked by what you said, that you would want a child with Down syndrome and that you would want to be a person with Down syndrome. What do you mean by that? Can you say more about that?
Sure. Um, so if you think about from God's perspective, what does he want? And I'll give you a story that was told to me to give you this, because it's a lot easier to share it in a story. I was listening to this pastor, I can't remember his name now, but I was listening to it, and he said, you have two children, one's 7 years old, one's 17 years old, and they're in the backseat of the car, and you're driving, and the 17-year-old is, when are we going to get there? Why can't I bring my girlfriend along? And the 7-year-old is just, okay, whatever mom and dad want, I'm content.
Mhm.
And that's what God wants. He wants us to be content. He just wants us to turn everything over to him and rest. And one of the things Grace said to me many times is, God's got this, Dad. And the difference between her and me is that she actually believed it. And that's what God wants. So that's why I wish I had Down syndrome, because the cares, the burdens of this world, she never had them.
Wow. And it sounds like she had a great talent for loving people.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's countless stories of that. At her funeral, Cindy, my wife, and I, people are coming up to us constantly. You did such a great job with Grace, and 400 people came to her funeral. The whole entrance of the church was decorated with projects and things Grace did. And so I got up, and when it was an opportunity to speak to the people who were there, I said, everybody's coming up to us and saying how great of a job we do with Grace. But the reality is we didn't. And the reason we didn't is because we didn't have to do anything. She was the easiest kid of ever to take care of. You don't get credit in God's economy for loving the lovable. You get credit for loving the unlovable, which, I don't even know that I do that well in my sleep. No.
That's a really beautiful story. Well, sadly, we've run out of time. How can people help you in your fight? I mean, this must be a very expensive, time-consuming, exhausting battle, and it's just continuing. So how can they help? And specifically, if they want to donate, how can they do that? I mean, people
So
don't realize how expensive these battles are. So
yeah, it drained us, that's for sure. I mean, it was very expensive, but there's two things people can do. Both are on ouramazinggrace.net. That's Grace's website. So in the upper right hand corner, you'll see subscribe to the newsletter. That's my Substack. I do a fairly regular Substack once every week or two. And then second of all is right underneath that is, if you want to donate, we have a Give, Send, Go. And of course, I'd appreciate that. I'm not one to ask for money, because we've been blessed financially, and we just used virtually everything that we had for the trial. And I'm glad we did. It wasn't our money anyway, it's God's money. But it takes a lot to keep all this stuff going. I mean, that. I mean, you're in the fight just like I am. It's just, you've got a team, so your expenses are even higher than ours. And
it's all costly. I mean, lawyers are more expensive than anything. And I just want to end. I know that it's hard. It's not in a generous person's nature to ask for financial support, but I'm going to ask you guys who are listening to support Grace's dad's fight, because in addition to all the other stresses of taking on some of the most powerful interests on earth, you don't want to add financial stress, right? It is God's money, but they need more of God's money to do the next phase. So please go to ouramazinggrace.net. Is that correct? And if you can afford to subscribe to his Substack and send him a Give, Send, Go donation, or either or, please do. And there's the website right there. Is it graceschara.com? Or
that one is we have two websites. That's the one to follow the lawsuit.
Okay,
ouramazinggrace.net is the main website.
Is the one.
Yep.
I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to let you go. But I want to thank you so much. And just as a parent, you're such a role model. I hope whatever the world sends, I will be half the parent that you and your family are, and sister, and all of you have just you continue to honor your beautiful daughter and sister of your daughter every day. And we're really honored that you spent time with us here on Outspoken. So we wish you every success. We'll be following the next phase of this.
Thank you, Naomi. God bless you.
Thank you. I'm just going to say goodbye, and you too. God bless you too. And now, everyone, it's just me still live. Here we go. There's the ouramazinggrace.substack.com. Oh my goodness, that was really overwhelming. So important. Thank you for listening, everyone. We've got over 1,000 people listening live just on this one platform alone. I'm going to go into a second half hour, which I don't usually do, but there's so much happening today in addition to the conversation we just shared. First, I want to thank our sponsors. You guys, when you support our sponsors, you are supporting us when you use our promo code. And Mr. Schara is absolutely right. The work we do is very, very expensive. We are not sitting here, rolling in the bucks. Believe me, it's a struggle every month to keep our team paid. And you can make it easier if you care about this kind of independent journalism. So here are some incredible products that we want to tell you about, and services. Number one, brightcore.com. I just took my 3 capsules of kimchi. It's called Kimchi One. And you need to know about this. We eat like a credit card worth of plastic every year. And studies are indicating that there's plastic that crosses the blood-brain barrier into our brains because of microplastics. Microplastics are everywhere. They're in, they contain the food that we eat. They're in our water supply. They're in our garbage that goes into our land that then is back into our food supply and our water supply. And they're very toxic. They disrupt hormones. They disrupt your gut microbiome. And as I just mentioned, they cross the blood-brain barrier, causing distorted moods, depression, anxiety, and even cognitive issues. So you want to clear that out of your system. Well, there is not much that can do that, but several studies have shown that kimchi, the Korean condiment, actually can clear microplastics out and excrete them. So this is very important. There are 900 probiotic strains in kimchi. It is very difficult. I don't know about you, but if you're not cooking Korean food every day, it's difficult to eat a lot of kimchi. I find it difficult. I don't love kimchi when I eat it. It's a struggle to do more than a teaspoon or 2 for me. So to be able to take 3 capsules that have dried, condensed kimchi in them, totally tasteless, very easy to take, is a great, great gift. And so now I know that this positive substance is clearing out the microplastics to the extent that any substance can in my system, and keeping my mood stable, my energy stable. I have to say, I really love it. I was skeptical, but I'm taking it and I love it. And I'm more productive than I've ever been. So, and I have no more, I used to have gastritis. I don't need to give you too much information. Gone, right? That and various other things I'm doing, but I really want to credit Brightcore's Kimchi One. If you order now and use the promo code WOLF, you will get a free gift. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's also very wonderful. So go to brightcore.com. You've got to try Kimchi One. Seriously. there are other things you need to know about. You know about this because it's changed my life completely. Native Path. Go to getnativepath.com/daily clout. You've got to order your collagen, you guys. I don't have my collagen to hold up in front of the camera, but again, I would not tell you to spend your hard-earned money on these products if they didn't really work. You all know that I was looking at hip replacement surgery. I was limping. I was in so much pain. I couldn't drive. It's taken some months of diligence and a lot of other things I'm doing in terms of physical therapy, which I'll write an essay about, but it also took collagen. I had a frayed labrum. The founder of Native Path said collagen can heal the connective tissue. The cartilage is what a labrum is that holds your femur together. Again, not to give you too much information, but I was like, really? Because my allopathic orthopedist wanted to give me injections that are not FDA approved. And, they were sending me in the direction of eventually surgery. Well, I don't want to have hip replacement surgery for a lot of reasons, but one is that I don't trust hospitals for the reasons you've just heard. And also, I have spina bifida occulta, which means I'm already held together by like pedicle screws in my lower back. So I'm just very afraid of, yet another surgery that will replace an organic part of my body with something inorganic. So I wanted to see if I could heal myself. And I am literally 95% healed. I'm not in pain. I'm walking, I'm hiking, I'm biking, I'm going to the gym and doing weightlifting. I'm healed. Like, it's a miracle. I feel like it's a miracle, but I also really want to thank nativepath.com because their collagen is what I take every day, big scoop of it. It's very easy to take. It doesn't clump. You don't taste it. It dissolves in coffee or yogurt or a smoothie, whatever. And it's type 1 and 3 collagen, which is what your body makes most bioavailable. And so it goes to rebuilding or healing. I don't want to say rebuilding because I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know if that's technically the right word, but healing your cartilage, your joints, your bones, your skin, your hair, and also your gut lining is made of collagen. So collagen holds you together. And I've also been, not to be reductive, I've also been eating a lot of meat that has connective tissue in it. So, like brisket and soup bones in soup and so on. And raw milk. But all of that together, the collagen is a really important building block. When I travel and forget to take it with me, I feel the difference. I feel achy. I have trouble moving. I'm limping again. So I can't thank Get Native Path enough. getnativepath.com/daily clout, and you'll get up to 45% off. And it's very affordable compared with other collagen. You can get 3 or 6 packages in one, like bundle deals, and get huge discounts. When I ran out of collagen, Native Path collagen, I tried to get whatever I could find, and it was like $30. So Native Path is a really good deal compared with that, as well as being so high quality. They've got, millions of happy customers, tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. There's someone waiting at the customer service line to answer all of your questions and just cheer you on. I love, love, love that company. And we're honored that they're our sponsors. So you've got to try this for yourself. Tell me how it goes for you. But getnativepath.com/daily clout. And you just order the collagen, just do it. I've sent it to my mom. I'm sending it to anyone I love who will, let me ply them with collagen. And I just want to tell you something. I'm going to be 64 in 8 days, and I don't care. And I partly don't care because a lot of the things we don't like about aging, like your skin getting dry and wrinkled and crepey, collagen seems to be dealing with it. No surgery, no fillers, no injections. It's just me and Native Path collagen, as well as Brightcore and some other supplements that I'll write to you about. but you really don't, like, I don't know how to say this politely, but it's not just your face and hair and nails that collagen, helps to kind of protect and renew, or whatever it's doing that makes people look so good when they take it. It's all the skin all over your body. And I don't want to be like more indecent or grosser than that, but it's nice not to, not to be worrying about aging, everywhere. So, and it's nice not to worry about your hair being healthy. It's nice not to worry about your nails being healthy. Your joints, of course, are the most important thing for me, and the cartilage. And I cannot thank Native Path Collagen enough. So get nativepath.com/daily clout, use the promo code. And lastly, American Alternative Assets. You heard Mr. Schara, central bank digital currency. It's rolling out in Britain. They froze accounts in Canada of the truckers. In Vietnam, they've already digitized people's bank accounts. They switched people off for not being politically correct in Spain out of their bank accounts. So this is happening. You need to diversify. Brian and I are doing this. We are kicking ourselves. If we had invested in gold and silver 5 years ago, we would have more than doubled our investment, but it's not too late. There's a lot of scammy heavy metals companies out there, especially in the independent media space. We are very selective. We do deep dives, due diligence, reputational, homework on anyone who is our sponsor, but especially something as important as someone to whom you're going to give some or all of your IRA to invest in gold and silver and precious metals. American Alternative Assets has been around a long time. They have a very good reputation, and they're very transparent in how they manage your money, and they will put your assets, your liquid assets, into heavy metals. Silver's going up. I believe that in a total apocalypse, it's important to have silver as well as gold, because silver is easier to exchange with in smaller denominations. But I'm going to put as much money as I can of our hard-won, assets dwindling rapidly through inflation into gold. And I'm so honored to have American Alternative Assets as our sponsor. If you go to cloutgold.com, you can sign up to get started, and they will send you a free report explaining the 7 warning signs of a possible dollar collapse or economic collapse. The founder explained to me that those 7 are blinking red right now in the interview I did with him. And I believe it. I mean, it looks like 2008. It looks like 1929 in a bunch of ways. Debt, inflation, people are overextended. And, inflation, you've been to the supermarket, right? So your dollar in the stock market is losing value. Your dollar in an IRA is losing value. You really need to diversify. So real estate, heavy metals, whatever, lowers your risk by not putting everything in assets that can be switched off digitally, or just keep losing value because of inflation, or God forbid, a more serious correction of the market. So that's cloutgold.com. Again, when you use the promo code, you help us keep our doors open and pay our wonderful staff, and you keep getting independent journalism. Now, I want to talk a little bit before I leave you about what's going on today in New York. But first, I want to share some really amazing news. I looked on a site called Pod Status, which ranks all the podcasts around the world. And I had no idea that this humble podcast, as well as the other Daily Clout podcasts, are in the top 100 in a lot of countries, and in the top 100 to 200 in a lot of countries. Big countries like Canada, like the United Kingdom, like New Zealand, important countries, I should say. And I was also very moved to see that we're in the top 50 in countries like Nigeria, Ghana, and a lot of Asian, Indonesia, a lot of Asian countries. So I had no idea. I had no idea people were listening. Taiwan, all around the world. And Steve Jones, I got a heart from him. Thank you. This is very moving to me because you can imagine sometimes when you're in independent media like this, you sort of think, what's the point? We're being drowned out. We're being censored. You know, I'll never, ever in my life be invited back to CNN or MSNBC because I've told too many truths at this point, and because I talk to conservatives, right? As well as independents and liberals. I'll talk to anyone, but you're not allowed to in the legacy media. So I was shocked to find that we're actually bigger than some important legacy media sites. And then going over to something called Global X Rankings or xglobalrankings.com. We are literally bigger than the BBC on X. And my husband, Brian O'Shea, is bigger than the BBC if X Global Rankings are accurate. But we're also, bigger or as big as a lot of legacy media news outlets. So all this being said, it's about you, right? You're making us listened to around the world because you tune in. So I want to thank you as the listeners. It means a lot to us because our business model is we then go to our sponsors and say, look, we can reach all these people. And then that's how we keep our doors open. But I'm also just very moved because it means that in Ghana and Nigeria and Taiwan and New Zealand and Britain and Canada and Italy, Chile, we're very big in Argentina. People who love liberty are listening. I mean, that's so inspiring and moving. And it means that people who, have a lot of choices of state media or legacy media are choosing independent voices like ours. So thank you. This is huge. It has definitely put wind in my sails, metaphorically again. It's re-energized me. But I do want to thank you. And I want you to please keep sharing and subscribing, because that is what keeps us, that engagement keeps us moving up in those kinds of rankings. And that's very important for our business model, for us just literally staying alive. Everything we do is free. That there's a reason that I did it that way. But what that means is we have to make money somehow. We have no paywall. And that means, when you share, when you like, when you engage, when you comment on Substack, when you become a subscriber on Substack to Outspoken or to Daily Clout, Best of Daily Clout, that's how we keep our doors open. And really, if you can afford to donate or subscribe as a paid subscriber, it means so much to us, life or death, really. So think about what kind of media is important to you. Now, in our last 12 minutes, let's talk about what's going on in New York City today. It's the election, you guys. It's the New York mayoral election. If you've been following me, you know that I'm incredibly worried about the appearance on the scene, full-blown, immediate hit, immediate blowout in the primary of Zoran Mamdani. He is someone who, I look at my body language, it's not even conscious, but I'm like, using protective body language when I talk about him. He's someone, and as a patriot, this really makes me crazy. He was raised in this country, born in this country, raised in this country. Was he born in this country? He was raised in this country. He went to one of the best high schools in New York, paid for by New York City's taxpayer dollars, right? He had a really great free education. Then he got into Bowdoin, which is a very expensive private college in Maine. Then he had 11 adult years as a rapper and helping his mom in various kind of non-existent jobs. He had 11 adult years not as a U.S. citizen. He didn't choose to become a U.S. citizen until the window was closing at 12 years to become a U.S. citizen. And then he didn't become a U.S. citizen. He's a dual citizen. He's a dual citizen. He kept his Ugandan citizenship. In Uganda, they were executing gay people. Now they just imprison them for 10 years, but he took a picture with someone who is a leader in Uganda who calls for the reinstatement of the death penalty for homosexuals in Uganda. Uganda has horrible, horrible problems. And rather than helping Ugandans, where his family is very wealthy, very powerful, very influential, and he owns a $250,000 property in his name, he didn't do that. He decided to become a Queen's Assembly member, again, with literally no job, never managed anyone, never made a budget work, never made payroll. He has one of the worst, I think the worst record on attendance in the Assembly representing his Queen's district. And he sponsored only 3 bills when he was in the Queen's Assembly, when he was representing Queens in the State Assembly. And one of them was fast free buses, which was a failure. It was a pilot program that failed. So he comes out of nowhere with millions and millions of dollars, very sexy, well done, catchy TV ads or video ads. He's all digital. It's a very impressive, expensive campaign. And where's the money from? Well, Sam Antar and others have followed the money and found that he is being overwhelmingly funded by out-of-city funding, and specifically by CARE funding, which is the national organization connected to the Muslim Brotherhood that represents Islamic interests. So I love Islam. I love the Holy Quran. I have many friends who are Muslim. I love Islamic countries that I've traveled in. I have, it is a diverse society. It's a multi-ethnic society. It's a multi-religious society. That's not the problem. The problem is that there are fundamentalist Muslim interests who are funding the mass migration into, Britain and France and Europe, and the changing of the system to favor fundamentalist Islam. And that's happening in the judiciary in Britain in a number of different ways. I wrote about this in my essay, which I read here, The Red-Green Revolution. And it's happening in Minnesota. That is a weird situation. And in Michigan, tens of thousands of Muslims from failed states, like Somalia is a failed state where 95 to 99% of the women and girls suffer clitoridectomies, right? And everyone's okay with that. They were imported over here to the heartland. And as a former political consultant, I'm noting that that's a battleground. Those are battleground states, right? And now they're increasingly in positions of political influence. So that's intentional. That's the strategy. And it's happening around the world. And you're not Islamophobic for noticing it and worrying about it, because why? And I have studied Islam, and I say this with all respect for a great Abrahamic religion. It's not just the stated goals of these leaders, and I, quoted from some of them in my essay, The Red-Green Revolution, are not to assimilate into the United States or Canada or England or France. No. And, enjoy the multi-ethnic, multicultural society with a separation of church and state, and contribute to be better Americans, better Canadians, better British people. No, that is not the stated goal. The stated goal is to change the legal system. I used to think people who said this were insane, racist Islamophobes, but I have looked into it, and it is true. The change that is being sought is Sharia law. Well, why is that so worrying? Other religious groups who come to this country, Orthodox Jews are not trying to change American law into halachic law, and force everyone to observe 613 commandments and not eat pork and not eat shellfish and observe Sabbath on Saturday. They're not trying to do that. They're just grateful to be left alone to do that themselves. Same thing with Hindus. They're not trying to replace our system with Hindu beliefs, Hindu practices, Hindu gods, Hindu education. Same with Buddhists, right? or Shinto observers from Japan. They're not trying to change America into observing Shintoism. But these fundamentalist Muslim interests, money flowing through CARE from Qatar, which has invested over $1 billion in education and influencers in the United States, right, does want to change our system, our legal system, to Sharia law. And I can't believe that Tucker Carlson spoke positively about Sharia law. He does not know what he's talking about. He clearly hasn't read Sharia law. I have read Sharia law. And by the way, there's a lot of it because it's commentary, right? There's not just one text, which is Sharia law. And it's always being interpreted. According to Sharia law, women don't have the same rights as men. You can be violent to your wife. The marital rape really doesn't exist in Sharia law the way it does, and that was a hard fight in Western law. There aren't statutory rape protections against children or minors at the same ages as in Western law. Homosexuality is completely not tolerated. It just isn't. I quoted that in my last essay. There is nothing in Sharia law that is even interpreted as you're fine the way you are. God loves you the way you are. No. And Sharia law doesn't coexist with other legal traditions. It is the law. It's not just a prayer or a belief system. It's a legal system. Okay. So this is so serious that in Texas, Governor Abbott actually just passed I believe, a veto or resolution to ban Sharia law. But people really need to understand what the goal is. The goal is conquest. All right. Conquest of the West. I mean, I read the quote in my last essay from the leader of political Islam in Britain, basically saying, we are done losing. We lost and lost and lost since the 15th century in Spain when Ferdinand and Isabella, won against Islam. We lost the Crusades earlier in the 12th and 13th centuries. We lost Europe. The Ottoman Empire fell apart, before and into World War I. They want to reconquer, what they lost. And Islam, God bless it. It's a beautiful religion, but it's also, in Judaism, you're not even allowed to try to proselytize people. You're supposed to, if someone wants to convert to Judaism, you're supposed to say no 3 times because it's not easy being Jewish. And so you're not supposed to impose that on people lightly. You'll get targeted, you'll get, oppressed, you'll get kicked out of your country. You're supposed to deter people. Christianity, sure, there's evangelicals who seek to bring the good news to other people, but they don't do it as a Christianity doesn't right now. It used to in the Crusades, right? In Ferdinand and Isabella Spain, but right now Christian nations are not saying, oh, we have to conquer, Africa for Christ. We have to subdue, by the sword, these Muslim populations or these, Jewish populations. That Christianity isn't doing that right now. It hasn't done that for centuries. But radical Islam that is its stated goal. That's why you're getting these, clips and interviews of people who are being imported from the most extreme, not like modern, educated, sophisticated Islam, right? But the most primitive, medieval, tribal practitioners of Islam from Pakistan and Afghanistan and places where they cover women completely, right? Or gouge them to excise their clitorises, like Somalia. Those are the people being brought by the UN and by the State Department and by NGOs to France, to Britain, to Canada, to the United States, and then systematically being run for office with big funding, as I've just described. And then also, it seems, at least in Britain, a memo has gone out to privilege them judicially, to slap them on the wrist or less when they commit serious violent crimes. and to, penalize native-born people like Tommy Robinson in Britain very seriously for things like tweets or not handing over their phones to the cops. So this seems to be a methodology. It's a war. And I'm certainly aware in Britain, the state is moving these groups. You can see them. They look like soldiers. I've been saying this for years about the United States. Finally, we have Trump stopping this from happening to us. But it's a very thin barrier, right? Because who knows who's going to succeed Trump. But in Britain, no one's stopping them. And in Ireland. So these thousands of military-age men are being positioned in barracks, you guys, in decommissioned barracks or in new barracks. In Ireland, for some reason, they're called plantations. They're barrackses. And this is an act of war. And Britain and Ireland are so demoralized and, screened from information. Like my content doesn't even get out into Britain. I think it's filtered out. I don't know about Ireland, but they're not allowed to notice that this is war. They've stripped them of their weapons. They don't have weapons. I'm not calling for violence, but there's nothing they can do, to protect themselves at this point. If at a signal, those military units, their legions, I've been reading about Roman, how the Roman Empire subdued the known world in the first century. They sent legions and they garrisoned them, and then they had puppets, and that's, from the local community. That's how they ruled the known world, right? And if there was ever an uprising from the local people, Rome brutally suppressed it, crucified everybody, or took them to Rome and threw them to the lions in the amphitheaters. This is how. I mean, whoever is positioning these legions in Britain, in Ireland, in Canada, in the United States, they tried to, right? They have literally read Roman history, because this is how Rome subjugated the known world. And so you can assume that you're going to get more and more laws, suppressing the local population. That's how Rome did it, and privileging the occupiers. And then it'll be too late. And then if the local people rise up, they have no weapons, they have no guns, they're not even allowed pepper spray. And what are you going to do? Whereas in Britain, there's a lot of, I think it's a psyop, but it's also real, a lot of episodes of immigrants brandishing giant knives or scimitar-looking things, right? And so this is a psychological terrorization of the population to make them not want to confront an immigrant who might be menacing them or grabbing a child or assaulting a woman. So it's very nefarious. It's been done before in history. This is how it's done, right? Rome ruled for centuries the known world. Rome ruled Britain. Rome ruled France. Rome ruled Germany. Rome ruled Judea. All right. This is how they did it. So what am I saying to you? This is about to happen in New York. I guess I'm going a little over time. I'll go on another 15 minutes because this is really important. So if Zoran Mamdani wins, and when I say wins, I have so much suspicion of the whole methodology. That's what we're looking at. The under the Biden administration, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of illegal Muslim immigrants have been brought from some of the worst places on earth to the greater New York area. It's gotten better. Some of them have self-deported. Some of them have been deported, along with other illegal immigrants. But we're still in an incredibly vulnerable situation in a Mamdani regime. Mamdani has said that he'll defund the police and replace 911 police responses with, mental health assessments, and empower a civilian team to oversee the police, meaning his political allies. So what that does right away in a Mamdani victory is it means that if you're set upon by a group of these mercenaries, essentially, is my reading of who a lot of them are, you can't, you'll too bad if you call the police. The police will have to answer to Mom Donnie's puppets overseeing the police rather than an actual police commissioner. And too bad if you call 911, because they'll assess you, and they might even do what they're doing in Britain, which is send help if you're of this population and not send help if you're of that population. Or if there's a conflict, release the aggressor from that population and penalize you if you try to defend yourself from this population. So it is the end of New York if he wins. The other thing I'm going to say is nothing suggests that the numbers we're seeing for his popularity are credible. And let me tell you why I say that. In New York State, we have voting machines. And I voted in New York State. And they took in New York City, our very good voting machines that were very old school, where you went chunk, chunk, and it pressed it created a puncture in a card, right? Those are easy to verify. You can't make mistakes. They can't be digitally hacked. They got rid of those. And now you vote digitally. And I've written this essay. It's on my Substack. No, in no way can you know if you're voting digitally that the votes were tallied correctly. The software is proprietary. You can't even look at the code. You can't look at the software. And I work with developers. I have a tech company. I'm not a technologist, but I understand. Our developer explained this to me. With the way machines are set up in New York State, many places in America, which is why President Trump is right to get rid of electronic voting altogether. But until that happens in New York State, you fill out a paper ballot, right, for theater, and then you feed the paper ballot into a digital machine. That's it. You don't get a receipt. You get nothing that you can tally. You get nothing that can be counted publicly. Now, I'm a big nerd about this, but in America and many other places, you used to be able, they counted the paper ballots on a dais in front of the whole town. This one goes there, that one goes there. And if there was any question, they could look at it, they could scrutinize it, observers could look at it. It was all transparent and in public. You could recount if there was a problem. No, that's gone. So why are polls saying so many elections are neck and neck, neck and neck, neck and neck? I've studied history. Elections aren't neck and neck. Historically, before there were voting machines, elections had wide swings, because that's how history works when it's organic. You have a progressive era and people are widely supportive of a progressive era. You don't get these razor thin margins that make it so much easier to cheat, right? 200 people, we won by 200 votes. Well, it's pretty easy to generate those 200 votes. Let me tell you what you can do with the voting machines. In New York State, you can give the password and the login to some random person in Ukraine or Russia or China or anywhere, and they can get in and change the algorithm, right? Or change the bottom line. That's the level of security. Or you can even design the algorithm itself so that I feed in my paper ballot and I voted Republican, and it counts every Republican vote as 2 Democratic votes. You can do that with a snippet of code, and no one's allowed to look at the code because it's proprietary. So in what world is that a secure voting system? And if people say, well, wait a minute, how can that be that, all of Staten Island went Democrat, it's such a Republican place? You have no recourse. You can't count the votes in Staten Island. You can't. They're gone. And you can't look at the algorithm, which can do all of this electronically. All right. Do you understand that? You've got to understand that. And if you're voting electronically anywhere else in the world, you've got to understand this. It is a fake system. We can't know who won anything in America going back to 2005 when the electronic machines were introduced all over the United States. So what I'm saying here, I hope I don't get arrested. We did it in 24 with presidential, and I think it really helped. Take a picture of your ballot and send us the picture, and we'll keep it in a proprietary confidential archive. We won't make it public, but we can de-identify it, and then we'll have a record. All right. And if there's a question, these evildoers will know that there is an archive somewhere of citizens that have kept photographs of people's ballots so that we can map them in a way that de-identifies you to the total. It's a very primitive system, but for sure, they need to know that we're watching and that people are watching. Now, I can't tell you to break the law because I don't want them to come after me. The laws vary from precinct to precinct almost about whether it's legal for you to take a picture of your ballot. If you don't look up that law, you won't know if it's legal or not to take a picture of your ballot. But all over the United States, it is in fact legal to take pictures of your ballots. And this is derisively called a ballot selfie. Just if it's legal, you can look it up on Google. Just take a photograph of the ballot you have voted with after you filled it out and send it into Daily Cloud. I'll create a portal for this, just like I did last time. Our developer will set it up, and it'll stay in a private archive until it's time to count them up and de-identify them. And we got, hundreds of ballots the last time. I don't know that we reached the level of we can map what we got against claims of election outcomes, but I do know that it mattered that people were watching. And what we did also get was reports of irregularities and documentation of irregularities. We did that in 2014 with the Scottish referendum for independence, and we found 400 people wrote in that they had been given bad ballots, invalid ballots, blank ballots in districts that were going to vote yes to independence from Britain. So this is something that has to happen. Citizens have to create their own archives to document the vote and say, well, wait a minute, you're saying that Staten Island, the Democrats won by 200 votes. Well, we have, 14,300 votes for Republicans in our archive. Let's do a recount. All right, stop everything. We need to do that, you guys. So send it to info@dailyclout.io. Again, I'm not asking you to break the law, check the law. But if it's legal, take that photograph of your vote, and let's also go ahead and change the laws so that by next election day in New York City and all over New York State, we're voting with paper ballots, and we can take photographs of our ballots. All right, so you know why I'm scared to death of Zohran Mamdani. And lastly, the city council. I'm so mad about this. We're being told you have to vote for Andrew Cuomo to stop Zohran Mamdani. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But I know that news coverage of Curtis Sliwa, who I will just say is my favorite, he's cared about this city for decades and put his life on the line for this city. And he stood with the first responders, and he understands this city, right? Andrew Cuomo was the one who violated every one of our rights in New York City during the lockdowns. He falsely said that we couldn't have more than 6 people in a room at one time. He violated our First Amendment rights. He violated our Fourth Amendment rights. He killed elderly people by moving people infected with COVID into old folks' homes, which had never happened before. He lied. He made it, I wrote about this in my book, The Bodies of Others. He made it illegal to bury dead people. He stopped burial in cemeteries. So cadavers stacked up in funeral homes. And then he brought in New York Times reporters to take pictures of overflowing funeral home shelves, allegedly due to COVID, when it was due to the fact that he was forbidding people from burying bodies in cemeteries. He kept kids out of school unlawfully for 14 months. They're still behind, especially lower income kids from, Black and brown kids. They have lost a year and a half of schooling, in-person schooling that they can never get back. All the kids in the city were harmed by this. Half of New York's public school kids between the grades of third grade and eighth grade cannot read or write at grade level. Half of them. Andrew Cuomo is responsible for a lot of that. He went after religious communities. He threatened Orthodox Jews because they were ignoring his mandate to not assemble together, and they were worshiping and having weddings and funerals. And he threatened them. And he had no legal right to keep us from assembling or worshiping. He had no legal right. There was a massive transfer of wealth under his watch. Small landlords were not allowed to evict people for 6 months. So they had to sell their properties if their tenants were bad and not paying rent at fire sale prices. And BlackRock and Vanguard scooped up properties throughout the 5 boroughs. Massive wealth transfer. Mom and pop stores died. Small restaurants and bars died because of the mandates that were based on fake science. So I'm not thrilled that, that's all been erased in the rear view mirror, and we're being told save the city by voting for the guy who did all of that. So, and that brings us to Curtis Sliwa. I'm just sharing. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I would like, I don't want to vote for Mamdani or Cuomo. I think they're both evil. It's like evil 1 and evil 2. Here's the thing. Sliwa's news about him has been suppressed systematically. I mean, we saw yesterday that our friends Cafecito Break, who are these wonderful young women who do a podcast focused especially on the Hispanic American community in New York City, and their health freedom independents, or maybe even Republicans, right? Like a lot of people I'm hanging out with these days in New York and Brooklyn, they were getting a lot of traction pointing out that the Cuomo team had lied about claiming that Sliwa was helping Mamdani. And they had been at the event that that the Cuomo team was lying about, and they called BS, and they were suspended from X and then shadow banned. We're seeing the same thing happen with Athena Clark. As you know, Daily Clout has been, as a professional matter, helping Athena Clark's campaign. She's running for District 46. She's an amazing young woman, a teacher who was mandated. Her husband's a firefighter. She is promised to take on the corruption in District 46, to bring back small businesses, to keep the streets safe, to really fight against this Uber, Lyft, Airbnb Democrat machine that has taken over District 46. She's being shadow banned. So if you're in District 46, go. I'm just going to tell you, we wouldn't have agreed to help this young woman if we didn't really believe in her as a candidate of integrity who could help and support all New Yorkers. But remember that you need a strong city council, whoever becomes mayor, to stop the agenda of a bad or evil mayor, right? It's like the Senate and Congress. A bad president can only get so far if Senate and Congress is conscientious. So you need to support Athena Clark, District 46. That is my view. Disclosure, we are helping her professionally with social media. But I'll be live streaming from her watch party tonight at the Brooklyn Yacht Club, the Hudson River Yacht Club in Brooklyn. Come join us. I believe festivities start at 6, maybe a little earlier. Double check that. But don't miss that. I'll be there. Brian O'Shea may well be there if his train gets in on time. Athena will be there and her wonderful family. Jimmy Wagner will be there, the kind of instigator behind this wave of amazing young candidates from the communities in question who are running as Republicans. I think it's a huge news story. The national Republicans have not covered it as a news story, to my surprise, but she's an amazing person. They're all an amazing community. A lot of first responders. Michael Caine of Teachers for Choice may well be there. A ton of wonderful firefighters and cops and teachers, the people who make New York live and thrive and put their lives on the line. So come join us, support us, and be there. And if you're voting in New York, listen to everything I've said. I would say vote your conscience. The last thing I would say is do not trust the polls. I did a deep dive on Intel, Atlas Intel polling, which all the legacy media are citing. It's not a pollster. It's all digital. It oversamples. People with grad school educations and college educations grossly oversamples them. It's not a traditional poll. It's based in Brazil, and it skews toward Democrats. So it's very fishy that that's the only poll that anyone is citing. It's not a poll. It's a digital only trick, and it's very opaque. You can't see the data. They won't show you the data. It's hidden behind Bloomberg's paywall. So that's not a poll, guys. And the methodology sucks. So who knows who's ahead? So I would say go vote your conscience. But I don't want to be responsible for a Mamdani victory. So ask God what to do. And in the meantime, vote. You can find your polling place on findmypollingplace.com or nycvotes.org. Find it, go there, wait in line, bring your phone, bring some snacks, bring some water. You have to make your voice heard and photograph your ballot if it's legal to do so, and send it to us at info@Daily Clout. And I will see you at the Brooklyn Yacht Club this evening, everybody. Come meet Athena Clark and Jimmy Wagner and the wonderful team from Teachers for Choice, all the brave first responders who keep us safe, and let's save this city and this country. They go together. It's not just a New York thing. I love you all. I'm signing off. Remember to support us at Daily Clout, subscribe, donate, think about what you get with Daily Clout coverage, and go over to Substack. My Substack is Outspoken. Subscribe, donate. I really need your help. And fingers crossed, may God save New York and America. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone. And I will end